Okay, welcome back to part 2 of infections of the skin. So we left off at staphylococcal scalded skin syndrome. And this is a dermolytic condition. Dermolytic means that it will actually break down the skin. And this is caused by Staph aureus. It develops predominantly in newborns and babies. And it's something that can really affect a newborn because their skin is so soft and it's not fully completely keratinized like a child's skin or even an adult skin. It is a form of impetigo, and you have phage encoded exfoliative toxins A and B are responsible for the symptoms. So phage means that the bacteria actually pick this up from a bacteriophage. The bullous lesions are caused by exfoliative toxins A and B. They have the appearance of wrinkled tissue paper, and this leads to widespread desquamination of the skin, okay? Essentially breaking down the layers of the skin. Patients are left vulnerable to secondary bacterial infections as a result of staphylococcal scalded syndrome. And you can sort of see that here, the infection. The modes of transmission for this is direct contact. Again, the virulence factors, the thing that's causing the damage is exfoliative toxins A and B. And, the mortality rate's low, but it is something that's very common in newborns. Okay. And in this particular picture going back, what you see happening here is the exfoliative toxin is produced in this local infection here, and it's causing a peeling away of the outer skin. Okay. And here you can see the point of epidermal shedding. So you can see it's sort of breaking off. The epidermal shedding is desquamination of the epidermis. Okay, gas gangrene. So gas gangrene, or gangrene as it's commonly referred to, this is actually caused by an anaerobic bacteria. You have two forms. You have anaerobic cellulitis. This usually remains localized, or true myonecrosis. This spreads to the nearby healthy tissues. With the true myonecrosis, this is serious. This needs to be mitigated as soon as possible. And unfortunately, the mitigation is the removal of any of the affected tissue. And this is where you start to see, amputations of, say, toes, feet, and in this case, this is going to have to be amputated just below the knee in order to prevent the spread of this. Yeah, the organism that's responsible for this is Clostridium perfinigens. And this actually produces several active exotoxins. And these exotoxins are what actually causing degradation of the skin and eventually the underlying muscle, and this can actually even get into the bone. Clostridium, if you remember from an earlier chapter, chapter 4, is a spore-forming bacteria as well. In the US, we typically see an incidence of 900 to 1,000 cases annually. The mortality rate is about 25%, but it can reach 100% if treatment is delayed. Okay, let's talk about our vesicular and pustular rash diseases. There are 3 diseases that present itself as generalized rashes all over the body, in which individual lesions contain fluid. These lesions are called pox. So we have chicken pox, which can lead to a reactivation later in life as shingles, smallpox, and then hand, foot, and mouth disease. And by the way, all 3 of these are highly contagious. So with chickenpox, in most people, chickenpox is a mild disease. In most cases, resolve in 2 to 3 weeks. However, some can experience some secondary infections, and it can be life-threatening in immunosuppressed people, older adolescents and adults. 0.1% of cases are followed by encephalopathy, and vaccine is currently available for infants and children. It's actually part of the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine series. It used to be just MMR, now it's MMRV. If you've had chickenpox, and this is only if you've had chickenpox, due to lack of exposure to the chickenpox virus because children are being vaccinated, and if it's been a period of time, and if you have other stressful or other factors that are playing a role here, the chickenpox virus, which is human herpes virus 3, or varicella zoster virus, can reactivate. And when it reactivates, what happens is the virus can come back as shingles. Okay. So essentially, after recuperation from chickenpox, the virus enters the sensory endings of the nerves in the dermatomes, as shown here, which are the regions of the skin supplied by cutaneous branches of nerves, especially from the thoracic nerves in the torso. From there, the virus becomes latent and remains within the ganglia. Months or years later, and again, this could be 20 years later, what can happen is the virus can reemerge from these cells, resulting in a densely packed lesions on portions of the skin that are actually served by the nerves that the virus has taken up latency in. And this reemergence is called shingles. Shingles presents with characteristic distributions of lesions, usually along a single dermatome. So what that means is typically when you look at somebody that has shingles, it's typically in a banding pattern that you're seeing this reactivation sort of come through. Now, smallpox has been eradicated worldwide, and that's been since the early 2000s. And actually, we've stopped vaccinating. Most countries in the world have actually stopped vaccinating against this. We stopped vaccinating against smallpox in the US in the early 50s. Smallpox is a naturally occurring organism, and like I said, it's been largely eliminated. It is still considered a biological terror threat. The progress of the rash, which is macular, papular, vesicular, and then finally pustular. It leaves serious scar tissue, and there are two types. Variole or major, this is highly virulent, leading to toxemia, shock, and intravascular coagulation. And variole or major has a very high mortality rate. Variole or minor, this is a rash, is less dense, and patients experience weaker symptoms. Hand, foot, and mouth disease. This is most common in babies and children under the age of 5. It's highly, highly contagious. If your child ever ends up with this, make sure you wash your hands every time you touch that child, because the worst thing is an adult catching this. It causes fever, sore throat, and malice. You can have painful spots inside the mouth. You'll get red or blister-like spots on the palms of the hands and soles of the feet, and often in the genital area and the buttocks regions. And it's caused by the Coxsackie virus. And again, here's the table that just sort of summarizes up chickenpox, smallpox, and then hand, foot, and mouth disease. Measles. 2019 actually saw a 300% increase in reported cases of measles in the US. And the reason for this is lack of vaccination. For some reason, there's pockets of people that just refuse to get their children vaccinated. And most people have not actually gone back for their booster for MMR. If you work in a healthcare center, you probably have gone back for this, but if not, you probably, you don't have the protection you had when you got your vaccine as a child. The effective vaccine has been available since 1963, and this was almost eradicated, okay? Currently, about 85% of the world's population is vaccinated, and 95% is required to stop virus transmission. Before the vaccine was introduced in 63, measles killed almost 6 million people per year. But again, like I said, in 2019, we saw a 300% increase in reported measles cases in the US because people decide not to vaccinate their children. And this can oftentimes be a very fatal mistake when their child dies because of their beliefs in not vaccinating. The signs and symptoms of measles: you can have a sore throat, dry cough, headache, conjunctivitis, inflammation of the lymph nodes, and fever. Cold block spots appear as a prelude to the characteristic red macular papular region. Small number of cases develop laryngitis or bronchopneumonia. In 6% of the cases, the virus can cause pneumonia. Most serious complication is what we call subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, which leads to neurological degeneration of the cortex, white matter, and brainstem, and can most likely lead to death. Rubella, this is also known as German measles. This causes a relatively minor rash with few complications. Serious damage can occur when the fetus is exposed to the womb. So we're really concerned, in pregnant women sort of contracting this, because this can actually lead to a stillbirth. So women of childbearing age, make sure that they have their MMR booster and that they are vaccinated, because if they do contract this, it can be fatal. Congenital rubella, this is the infection in the first trimester. Like I said, oftentimes it can lead to a miscarriage. It can also cause multiple permanent defects in the newborn, such as deafness, cardiac abnormalities, ocular lesions, rashes, mental and physical retardation. Okay, fifth disease, this is erythema infectiosum. This is a mild disease that results in a slap-cheeked appearance. It's typically in children, young children, causes low-grade fever and malaise, and the rash may persist for weeks and recurs under stress or with sunlight. It can cause more serious disease in immunocompromised individuals. And the causative agent is parvovirus B19. Rosella, this is common in young children and babies. 70% of cases proceed with no rash. This leads to a high fever that comes quickly and lasts for about 3 days. Seizures may occur during this period. By the time the rash appears, the disease is almost over, and 100% of the US population is affected by adulthood. So most people will have had this. And here's a table that sort of goes over the macular papular rash diseases. Again, measles, rubella, which is German measles, fifth disease, and then Rosella. Warts. Warts are caused by human papillomaviruses, and they're referred to as papillomas. They develop in nearly all individuals, children more than adults. Seed warts are painless, elevated rough growths on the fingers and other body parts. Plantar warts, which is the image that you're seeing here, can be deep, painful papillomas on the soles of the feet. And the reason why they're very painful is because you're putting the pressure on the foot, on the wart, which is on the foot. Flat warts, these are smooth, skin-colored lesions that develop on the face, trunk, elbows, and knees. Okay, and with the warts, what you can end up having is you can also get genital warts, which is caused by certain HPV strains. We will talk more about HPVs a little bit later on, especially in the reproductive system, because this is something that is also a sexually transmitted infection. So we will come back to that. And here's a table that sort of goes over HPVs. Leishmaniasis, this is a zoonotic disease. Zoonotic means that it can be transmitted from multiple animal species. So I generally tell people, what makes your dog sick won't make you sick, and what makes you sick won't make your dog sick. And leishmaniasis, you can have two types. You can have what they call cutaneous leishmaniasis. This is a localized infection of the skin and capillaries of the skin. It's typically found in the Mediterranean, African nations, and South Asian regions. Mucocutaneous leishmaniasis, this affects both the skin and the mucous membranes. And this is endemic to parts of Central and South America. And here you can see an image of cutaneous leishmaniasis. Anthrax, or specifically cutaneous anthrax, which affects the skin. The most common and least dangerous infection caused by Bacillus anthracis. Now, again, Bacillus, this is a spore-forming bacteria, as you guys learned in chapter 4. Bacillus and Clostridium species are both spore-forming bacterial species. This forms a black eschar when the endospores enter the skin and germinate there. 11 cases occurred following a bioterroristic attack in the fall of 2001, and it does have a 20% mortality rate if left untreated. And treatment for anthrax is ciprofloxacin. So here's our large pustular skin lesions. Again, you have leishmaniasis and cutaneous anthrax. Okay, let's talk about some of the fungal infections. We have ringworm. This is cutaneous mycosis, which means a skin fungal infection. Dermatophytes, these are mycoses strictly confined to non-living epidermal tissues and their derivatives. And a tinea, this derives from the erroneous belief that these infections were caused by worms, but they're not. They're actually caused by bacteria. So ringworm of the scalp, this mycosis results from a fungal invasion of the scalp and hair of the head, eyebrows, and eyelashes. Ringworm of the beard, also called the barber's itch. This affects the chin, beard of adult males, and it's contracted mainly from animals. Ringworm on the body, which is the bottom picture here. This can appear nearly anywhere on the body's smooth or bare skin. You can also get jock itch, which is ringworm in the groin. The crural ringworm occurs mainly in males on the groin. You can also get perianal skin, scrotum, and occasionally the penis. The fungus thrives under conditions of moisture and humidity created by sweating. You have athlete's foot, which is ringworm on the foot. Again, with athlete's foot, this is also referred to as jungle rot, blisters between the toes that burst, crust over, and can be spread to the rest of the foot and nails. And then finally, ringworm of the nail. These are tinnias. This is a common sites are the fingernails and toenails. First symptoms are usually superficial white patches in the nail bed. More invasive form causes thickening, distortion, and darkening of the nail. Okay, so now we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we'll talk about infections of the eye. So the surface of the eye and its defenses, you have the conjunctiva. It's exposed to the environment. It's a thin membrane-like tissue that covers the eye and lines the eyelids. It secretes an oil and mucus-containing fluid that lubricates and protects the surface of the eye. The cornea is also exposed to the environment. You have a dome-shaped central portion of the eye lying over the iris. 5 to 6 layers of epithelial cells that can regenerate quickly if superficially damaged. This is essentially the windshield of the eye. Tears are your best defense of the eye. It consists of aqueous fluid, oil, and mucus, and it's formed in the lacrimal gland at the outer and upper corner of each eye. This will drain into the lacrimal duct at the inner corner. And if you look at the surface of the eye and its defenses, you have what's referred to as immune privilege. What this means is reduced innate immunity eye helps to protect vision. The T cell responses in the eye is reduced significantly. The anterior chamber is largely cut off from blood supply. Lymphocytes that gain access to the eye are less active than anywhere else in the body. So you really don't have that protection from your normal immune cells. Now, there are some normal organisms that we do find on the eye, and it's really corneum bacterium is the most common type. But you can also see a lot of stuff that you typically find on the skin. Okay. So again, this is just a table that sort of summarizes the defense mechanisms that you have for the eye, as well as the normal microbiota. So now let's look at some of the diseases. Conjunctivitis, this is a relatively common infection of the conjunctiva. Bacterial infections will lead to milky discharge. Here you can see a newborn with neonatal conjunctivitis. This is actually, what you're looking at here is actually gonorrhea. The mother had gonorrhea, was not treated for gonorrhea, and this is the result of, unfortunately, giving birth to the baby with an active infection. This is problematic because this can actually lead to blindness. In the United States, it's common practice that all newborns, once vaginal births, they are it used to be they would put antibiotic salve over. What they kind of do now is they kind of coat the entire baby in an antibiotic salve just to, prevent anything like neonatal conjunctivitis or, scalded skin syndrome or anything like that. Viral infections can cause a clear exudate. You also have allergic response, which is copious amounts of clear fluid can be released. And then you also have retinas of the eye, swelling are common, photophobia, and the informal name for conjunctivitis is pink eye. So here are some of the things that can cause conjunctivitis, whether you're talking about neonatal. Again, like I said, it's mainly chlamydia or gonorrhea. I mentioned gonorrhea earlier, but it can also be chlamydia. And by the way, chlamydia is actually the leading cause of gonorrhea. Is the leading cause of blindness worldwide, especially in developing countries where they do not have access to clean water as available as we do here. And what can happen is the chlamydia can cause what we call trachoma. And you can see the inflammation here, you can see the lesions, and you go through a few rounds of this, this will eventually lead to blindness. Keratitis, this is more serious infection than conjunctivitis. This can lead to complete destruction of the cornea. It can also be caused by any microorganism after trauma to the eye. And this is actually, some people can end up with HSV, which is herpes simplex virus, which is what we commonly refer to as oral herpes. Instead of coming down the normal route where it would sort of affect like the lower lip or the corner of the lip, it will actually travel up and you can end up with a herpes infection in the eye. And that can be serious. That can lead to blindness. That needs to be addressed. Okay, so the next couple slides are just sort of a summary of a lot of the taxonomy organization of the microorganisms that cause disease in the skin and the eye. So we have our gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, and you can see all the diseases that can cause by them. If you look at something like Staph aureus, you got multiple things that can happen. MRSA, cellulitis, necrotizing fasciitis, conjunctivitis. Yeah, this is a nice little summary table. We have our DNA viruses, which cause things like chickenpox, smallpox, warts, conjunctivitis, and then you have your RNA viruses, which can cause hand, foot, and mouth disease, measles, rubella. We have certain fungal infections. You have your ringworms, and then the protozoa, leishmaniasis. And then we didn't talk about the worms, but you do have some worms that can lead to river blindness as well. And this is just, taking that table and kind of putting by area of the body where you can see some of these infections. And the color, whether it's orange, red, green, or blue, indicates what type of species is it. Is it bacterial, viral, protozoan, fungal? Yeah, you guys can read the key. All right, and that's it for chapter 18. Hope you enjoyed it.